What's up, Barnhill family, and welcome back to your home for all things combat sports.
Yo.
Guys, we got a great episode for you today. UFC 322 is just around the corner, and we figured we would really focus on the welterweights for this episode because it's really kind of moving day in the division. We have 3 fights that are super meaningful. Of course, you have the fight for the belt, but then also you have Morales on the card. He's taking on Sean Brady. There's implications there. Former champion Leon Edwards versus Carlos Prates. There's a lot of stuff that's going to shake out what's to come in 2026 for welterweight. Of course, we cannot finish today without talking about what happened over this past weekend. You know, I think Steve Garcia really emerged himself as a true top contender at 145. We're going to talk about his call outs and some of the fun fights that could be had for him and whether or not he could really make a run to the top. The heavyweights, you know, we have Tom Aspinall's training partner doing the same thing that happened to him. A weird ending to that fight with Waldo ending up getting the knockout after the eye poke. And then, of course, we're going to wrap the conversation talking about the Cuban problem, Yadier Del Valle. I think Nick's got some really interesting insight on that one because he is actually a training partner of Yadi's and can give a little, you know, backwards or backdoor sort of look at how good he actually is, whether or not he even should have been the underdog, and what happened with the whole allegations of fight fixing and stuff like that. So we have a great episode for you today. But Nick, I think we start by doing what we like to do best, which is to break down fights from a technical standpoint. And, you know, anytime there's an Islam Makhachev fight, Jack Della Maddalena, we have it for the title. I mean, I think we got to start there, right? Because there's going to be over the next 2 weeks, obviously next week, we're going to make our predictions as to who we think the winners of the fights are going to be, but today we really focus on ways to win and keys to victory for each man. And give me your thoughts on Jack starting out. What do you think Jack's easiest path to victory is?
Well, I love this fight so much, and I've been waiting for it. And of course, ESPN is on their last leg as far as covering the UFC. So we're a little light on some cards, but 322 absolutely delivers. And this is probably the fight that people are looking most forward to for this entire year. Going into Khamzat versus DDP, that was the fight, but it didn't live up to people's expectations. I believe Islam and Jack is like that, but a little bit more technical, and there's a little bit more on the line. Of course, you throw in things like Madison Square Garden, and it only sweetens the pot more. But yes, from a technical side, this fight is intriguing because what we're seeing out of Jack Della Maddalena is a totally different style of fighting and body type than what we've seen Islam compete against at 155. Now, Jack is a very high-level striker, and we've seen him have a ton of success at 170 against other great strikers and grapplers, but nobody at Islam Makhachev's level. Now, skill for skill, most people still have Islam Makhachev as the most well-rounded fighter in the UFC. But this style versus style is very intriguing because Islam has had trouble against rangy strikers, people who can extend their punches and find his target at the end of his strikes. Dustin Poirier was able to bloody Islam up a little bit. Even Volkanovski, who's a much smaller and totally different body type, was able to find his targets on Islam. And when I see that happen, I also have to say, of course, Jack Della Maddalena is going to be able to implement some offense in this fight. But how Islam approaches this fight camp is going to dictate where this fight takes place. Islam is not like most guys where once they start finding knockouts or once they start having a lot of success with their feet, they wind up becoming knockout artists. Islam still knows his best way to win this fight is by taking Jack to the ground and cooking him and then basically finding a submission or some ground and pound. I don't see Islam going out there trying to just strike with the high-level striker, but I also don't see him selling out for a takedown. I think Islam's going to go out there and be measured the way we saw him against Volk in the second fight. He's going to stay on the outside. He's going to look to strike and throw some kicks. Make sure Jack's defense is moving. You know, we see Jack all the time come in with a high guard, and he'll close distance that way, kind of eat some shots on the forearms so he can get in and mix up his variety of striking. It's going to be a little bit harder against Islam Makhachev because he can't overcommit with the strikes, and you definitely can't overcommit and compromise your balance.
Yeah.
Because as soon as you do that on a guy like Islam Makhachev, who all camp, you've probably thought, all I have to do is avoid him and make sure he doesn't come take me down. But these next level grapplers, what they tend to do is make you forget all about the grappling realm, and they'll stay striking with you. And then when you get a little bit comfortable and start moving in a little bit more inside of boxing range, that's when they change levels or find an angle and wind up getting their body lock. From then, of course, Islam is going to get the fight to the ground. But I think that if Jack goes out there and keeps this fight long and is very disruptive early, and that's usually comes from straight strikes. Kicks are good. Usually a push kick and a teep kick can go a long way to disrupt a fighter, but it's a double-edged sword when you're going against a wrestler, because when you start to push and teep a wrestler, you're now kicking above the waistline, and that becomes infinitely easier for them to catch the kicks. And once Islam Makhachev gets a hold of one of your legs, it's only a matter of time before you wind up on the ground. So if Jack's going to throw kicks, he's got to throw them at 100% speed, and he cannot telegraph them whatsoever. It should likely come mid-combination. I would start to throw or end combinations with some kicks. That would be the best way to avoid Islam catching the kicks, but easier said than done. I still think that Jack, if he's going to win this fight, needs to do it primarily with his hands and from a distance. Now, if he does some damage on Islam early, then you can close the distance a little bit. I know he believes in his takedown defense, and we've seen him get taken down by lesser opponents than Islam Makhachev so far in his career. But what he does when he does get taken down is very impressive, because he doesn't usually get blast doubled, or he doesn't wind up on his back instantly. Usually it's a single leg. Somebody will grab a single leg on Jack, and he'll look to get a switch, or he'll look to grab something to neutralize the position. And generally, if they do land the takedown, he winds up sitting on his butt, and then he's able to sort of wrestle up or create a scramble. Yeah. And that is the key for him if Islam takes this fight down. So I think offensively, obviously, we know where he's most skilled and how he can win this fight. I believe that's with a variety of strikes from a variety of ranges, especially if he hurts Islam. You got to start attacking that body. A guy like Islam Makhachev doesn't get tired from grappling, and that's usually very difficult to deal with when you're the primary striker. But if Islam's not going to get tired from grappling because he's so conditioned to it, the one thing nobody can truly condition for is body shots. And Jack seems to chunk some heavy shots, especially when he has his opponents hurt. So I see Jack looking to tear the body up, because that could be what slows Islam down in the later fights, which I do predict we see in this fight.
Yeah, I think that's a really well said assessment, and I do think this one goes a little while.
Yeah.
You talked about Islam catching kicks and stuff like that. The thing about Islam, and I was talking to somebody about this fight, and they said, oh, it's going to be Jack Della Maddalena all day, because he's, Bilal couldn't take him down, and Bilal's a weight class bigger than Islam, and he's a wrestler. And I'm like, yeah, I see how on the surface level what you're saying makes sense, but Islam's methods of getting fights to the ground is just so different than Bilal's. I don't think you can compare the two. And I think Islam has a far bigger depth of tools that he can reach into and use to get takedowns. Think about the Dustin Poirier fight with the foot drag. That was the Poirier fight, right? Where he dragged Dustin's foot and, use that. So it's not even like he's hunting singles or doubles. When, somebody's kicking at him, he can, do all kinds of things: leg drags, body locks, tie-ups, off balances, judo trips. I mean, he's really, really high level when it comes to takedowns. So I think Jack does need to be careful with his shot selection. One thing I think Jack really can utilize to his advantage is mid-combination feinting.
Yes.
And he's really good at that. He does angle off a lot. He's able to get two angles that are advantageous for him to strike and not advantageous for his opponent. That's going to be key for him. Also, it's key for the takedowns. And when Islam is retreating, he cannot retreat. Or sorry, when Jack is retreating, he cannot retreat in a linear fashion. He needs to create these angles and move. Because if he backs straight up, Islam will get easy takedowns on him all night long.
Right.
So what I think Jack needs to do is when he's advancing, he needs to create his angles, but he also needs to do some feinting mid-combination, because the feinting will stop. Islam's really good at timing a takedown while you're throwing a combo on him.
Right.
You're up here throwing a 1-2, and he's on your waist taking you down.
Right.
But if Jack can work in some feints to where Islam is saying, okay, I don't know what strike's coming. I don't know if there's going to be a knee up the middle.
Right.
Maybe there's an uppercut. He's showing it, but he hasn't thrown it. If he can even get, I mean, we're talking about milliseconds of hesitation here from Islam is what Jack needs to either be the difference maker between being on the ground or being on the feet. And it's no secret to say that Jack's advantage in this fight is on the feet.
Yeah.
Those mid-combination feints and the off-angling can allow him to make it at least more difficult. Now, does Jack's butt hit the ground at some point in this fight? I think you could pretty much guarantee it.
Yeah. There's your prop bet that you can, take to the bank.
If you wanted easy money, like I guarantee that happens, like, yeah, Islam probably gets a takedown in this fight. So that is, something that'll also probably be a minus 10,000. So you make like 10 cents on your $100. But anyways, Islam is for sure going to get a takedown. How does Jack react? How bad of a take? Because that's the other thing too, is like you said, Jack ends up on his butt a lot, but not so much flattened out on his back. So if you can avoid the takedown being really clean and, hey, you know what, he got me, but I was able to bounce right back and wrestle up. The other thing with the grappling, as far as Jack is concerned, is Craig Jones. I mean, Craig is just a really crafty guy. He's Australian as well, and he's been working with Jack Della Maddalena.
Helped Volk.
He helped Volkanovski in his fight against Islam, the first fight, and he said, look, we got the antidote to this Dagestani wrestling, and we're going to be really creative. And one thing about Craig is he's a really high-level jiu-jitsu guy who built a career off of, like, working out of his guard. Now, in MMA, the worst thing you can do, we talk about this all the time on the show, is try to play guard.
Right.
But somebody like Craig knows how to go from guard to getting a sweep or getting back up.
Right.
And that's where I think he brings value to the camp.
Yeah, and maybe something like Umar Nurmagomedov getting caught in that footlock by Mario Batista early on. I don't expect Jack to find himself in that situation, but if there ever is somebody you would want in your corner when you get a Dagestani fighter like that in a compromising position, it would be Craig Jones. He can probably video game talk you through how to find it. Now, is Islam going to tap to a footlock? No, not in a million years. But like you said, it could be the means to a way to stand back up.
Yeah.
And that's how Jack has to look at that. I love that you brought up the mid-combination feints. That is crucial in beating a guy like Islam Makhachev. If you know how to feint and make your guy freeze momentarily and then work on those open opportunities, you can have a ton of success. Jack is very good at it, but again, you have to get the respect from your opponent before you start showing your feints. They don't work near as well if they're not respecting you. And when you do a mock shot at somebody or you throw something and it's not really there, then they're seeing the read. They're seeing what you want to do. They're seeing how you want to freeze them, and then they're going to adjust. Somebody like Islam only needs 2 or 3 feints or 2 or 3 attempts before he goes, okay, I see what he's doing there. That's not going to happen. And I think that Jack Della Maddalena, if he wants to gain the respect early on, which he needs to do to win this fight, he's got to put some strong, straight punches right on Islam's face. Even if he's only hitting the guard, he needs to stay long when he's doing that, because that's going to force Islam to apply more pressure. And again, when you're fighting a guy like Islam, you don't want him pressuring forward. You'd rather put him on his back foot. But when you're dealing with that high level of a guy, he's going to take that momentum you're bringing towards him, drop under one of those straight punches like we were talking about, and now he's chest to chest with you or moving to your back.
Yeah.
So Jack's got to be very cautious of that. But I believe if he throws some heavy leather early in the fight, while Islam is still figuring out the pace and everything, trying to find his rhythm, if Jack does that, I think the feints will open up for him, and usually that winds up opening the body big time. And again, that's where we think Islam's biggest hole would be, because he's a human, so he's got a gas tank, and if you start to zap the gas tank, the 2 things that do that the most are body shots and cardio grappling, and he's got the cardio for the grappling. So you've got to start to tear the body up, tear the engine up, and then good things will come for you. But yeah, making Islam bite on the feints early is huge, but he's not going to get that respect unless he puts some heavy shots that are accurate on Islam first.
Yeah, very well said. I want to move on now to one of the other 170 fights and kind of break that one down. Really interesting. Michael Morales, 18-0. This kid's as hot of a prospect. I don't even know if we can call him a prospect anymore. He's kind of just a full-fledged contender.
Yeah.
Sean Brady, 18-1, I believe. And
crazy record. Yeah.
18-0, 18-1. I mean, these guys are phenomenal fighters, both of them. Sean Brady was somebody that we thought was going to be fast-tracked to a title until he had that setback with Bilal, but he's looked very good since then.
Right.
Kind of addressing some of the things that were deficient in his game. This is really interesting to me because Michael Morales is a lights out power striker.
Yeah.
Brady's more of a grappler, very strong. I mean, you look at this guy; he's built, like a heavyweight who's a little bit shorter, but
Right.
thick as can be. But Michael Morales has shown us that he's not the easiest guy in the UFC to take down.
No.
So, how do you see this one playing out? This one feels very much like Jack versus Islam to me, where one guy has a tremendous advantage on the ground, it's no secret, and the other has a tremendous advantage on the feet.
Yeah, so Sean Brady obviously is a high-level grappler, and he knows how to win fights via submission, but his striking is coming along. And I know he's not becoming a knockout artist, but sometimes when a wrestler starts to put things together with his hands, you go, okay, please don't fall in love with your hands. Don't become Justin Gaethje and look for go do what's going to get you, what got you 18 wins. Don't go do what got you one loss to Bilal, which was getting TKO'd by Bilal, which again, that's alarming for me because Michael Morales is a much better striker than Bilal. Now, Bilal brings a different style of pressure, and you have to worry about the level changes, and you have to worry about the constant pressure against the cage. Michael might not really push that on Brady. He's going to be a more elusive fighter. And you were actually bringing up one point about how Jack can't be a linear fighter. Michael Morales has shown in the past that he does back up pretty straight. And when everybody, it's not just him, everybody that backs up straight winds up getting tall. Their chin gets a little bit higher. And it's just a recipe for disaster if you keep doing it over and over the course of a 15-minute fight. Your opponent is going to figure out where the target is. And if it's not leaving the center line and all it's doing is going backwards a little bit, then you go with like a Dricus du Plessis approach of just start slinging long hooks back towards that direction and chase
sprinting at them Usain Bolt style, exactly. And just throwing hooks.
It's wildly effective. and Michael Morales, we've seen him back up and get pretty tall, and at times he'll even straight run, which is good. It works for him. He's not lost yet, so I'm not saying anything wrong about his game plan, but I would say that if he's going to fight a guy like Sean Brady, he's going to be needing to use every bit of the cage, and you can't let yourself get too close to the cage and then decide to back up in a linear fashion because then you're going to wind up on the cage. And I believe even though Sean Brady isn't Islam with the takedowns, he's pretty damn good at taking people to the ground.
Yeah.
And ground and pound is where he does a whole lot of damage. He usually softens them up and then finds his submissions. But the thing that stands out to me most is that Morales has never lost. He's very good on the feet. He's an athletic 170 and
a massive 170.
Massive.
He looks like a 185er.
Exactly. He's a very big, and Sean Brady is built different, right? I don't know the difference between endomorph and ectomorph, but body types are totally different on these two.
I'm sure we've got some sort of a body physiology subscriber.
Somebody let us know. Is Brady an endomorph and ectomorph, and is Michael Morales the opposite? Because they're not the same thing. But Sean Brady is a more compact fighter. He's very strong, but you can't really utilize strength if you can't get inside and get a hold of somebody. Michael Morales is very good at getting away and evading shots, but he's also very good at staying just outside of range and using that extra reach advantage that he has to land a long one after you've kind of done your blitz. And if that happens and he rocks Sean Brady, then the blitz now comes from Morales, and Morales is actually very good at throwing, at coming at his opponent with blitzes. What we see is an interesting variety, and he'll even double up the power side, right? He'll throw a heavy 2, and then he might throw a heavy same side kick, or he'll throw a heavy 2 and then switch it up, same arm, throws an uppercut next. He's just very good at mixing it up and being creative as to what strike hits you next. Of course, you couple that with his pinpoint accuracy, and he's able to find his targets, and that's why he's got a perfect record so far. So I think this fight being 3 rounds favors Michael Morales a little bit.
Yeah.
Now, Sean Brady has proven that he can beat high-level fighters. This is not the most high-level fighter that Sean Brady has faced to date, but Sean Brady is the most high-level fighter Michael Morales has faced to date. And I think we're going to see if experience outweighs athleticism and youth. I think Sean Brady has a great skill set, and if he comes in with the right game plan, he can win this fight through, overwhelming top pressure and grappling. Who knows if he can find a submission. I would be leaning more towards a decision if he were to win this fight. But again, Michael Morales, he knows in this fully stacked 170 division, he's sort of standing out as a top star. And look, there's tons of undefeated contenders, high-level prospects on the way up, former world champions, and then a great champion themselves, all right there, plus a couple of guys from 155 who are really high up in the pound-for-pound list. So the logjam at 170 is as thick as it's ever been, but Michael Morales has the opportunity to go beat a guy with a complete opposite style of him, on a 170 dominant fight card, and I think that would set him up for a bright 2026, potentially even a fight against, let's say, Carlos Prates wins and Michael Morales wins. Now you're talking about number one contender fight against two guys who are on the exact same schedule as each other and the champion.
Yeah, there's a lot that you just said there, and I think you're right on the money. So for me, Michael Morales, this fight is a rubber meets the road type of fight.
Yeah.
Because we know how good we think Michael Morales is, and we're going to find out if that's accurate or if he's not quite as good as we thought he was.
Right.
And that happens all the time, right? Sean Brady is as legit of a contender as it gets.
Right.
He's really, really skilled. On any given night, Sean Brady could be thrown in there for a title fight. Nobody would be upset about it, and he would be competitive in that fight.
Right.
Could win, depending on who he was fighting. So Michael Morales, as a young man in his early to mid-20s, getting in there undefeated, if he can win and even finish Sean Brady, I think we all can say, and the UFC will probably say, this is a guy we're looking at as a future champ, and not just a future champ, but a future star.
Right.
Because if you can be that good, that young, that athletic, and very marketable, I think you've got really bright things ahead. But as we've seen many a time where people get in there and it's like, man, this kid might just be the next big thing. We just saw it with John Silva.
Right.
This guy, man, who's going to beat this guy? He's a beast. And it's like, okay, yes, we have to be reminded that there's levels to this. It's like, Diego Lopez waxed John Silva.
Right.
Who got waxed by Volkanovski. I mean, it was a competitive fight, but Volkanovski clearly won, who got waxed by Ilia Topuria.
Right.
So, John said, we're all talking about, man, Silva versus Topuria. That would have been a killer fight if Ilia should have stayed at 145, because this guy would have been the guy.
Now John Silva's
so
thanking his lucky stars that Ilia's looking at 170.
Right, and is that, going to be what happens to Michael Morales? I don't think so. I think Michael's going to look pretty good in this fight. I'm not ready to make my prediction yet. I know we're going to do that next week. But I do think there's ways to win for Morales as there is for Sean Brady.
Yeah.
Really looking forward to it. A fight that I'm not as convinced both men can win is the other welterweight fight on the card. And I'll just go ahead and bury the lead. We'll do official predictions next week. Yeah. But I like Prates versus Leon.
Yeah.
And we talk all the time about how when you get a chance to fight a former champion, it's such a rare opportunity because they don't tend to stick around that long.
Right.
Especially in this era. You don't have the BJ Penns anymore, where people are just being allowed to hang out way past their welcome. The UFC wants to protect the allure of their champions. You're not just letting them go in there and get slaughtered for too much longer after they lose the belt. Leon's had a couple of setbacks. He's not really looked the best in the last couple of years. Prates has got an opportunity to go in there and put a check mark on his roster as having beat a former champion. And I think we're going to see a really sharp Carlos Prates.
Yeah, I'm with you. Carlos Prates versus Leon Edwards is a great fight, and it's a real test for Carlos Prates. Now, we're seeing him come off a highlight reel knockout of the year candidate with that spinning elbow. Yeah. And while I'd love to see something like that happen again, Leon Edwards is not the kind of guy that you're going to find some sort of crazy strike like that on. Leon is a very composed fighter. He didn't become a world champion for no reason. He's high level everywhere the fight goes, and just because he's fallen on hard times doesn't mean that he's washed or he's chopped and no good. I believe he's still a high level fighter. And his fight IQ is there. Now, we've seen him a little bit less aggressive and a little less hungry recently. And we talk about this all the time. Once you've made it to the top of Mount Everest, are you as excited to climb it again as the first time? No. And sometimes we see champions like Volkanovski, they have that same hunger in them, and they go They climb the mountain, they get knocked off the mountain, and they make it back up to the top again.
So rare, so uncommon. Though.
Right. Leon Edwards will never become a welterweight champion again. And now he's in that weird role where, yeah, we've got the next slew of guys coming in, and we need some names that they can beat potentially. And obviously you want to be like the Robert Whitakers of the world where nobody can beat you except for, every now and again somebody does slip through and they become world champion. Leon Edwards needs to not become a statistic in just being a champion that everybody rolls over, and it's sort of the easy step to get a former champion on your resume. But Carlos Prates is going to have to fight a little differently than we've seen him in the past. Think about the Ian Gary fight. Ian Gary and Leon aren't exactly the same fighters, but they're both very disciplined with their game plans. They're very good at staying long, at using their strikes and using a high level of offensive IQ to disrupt their opponent's ability to attack. And one criticism that I will give to Carlos Prates is sometimes it feels like he's such a high-level counterpuncher that he wants to just wait for the opportunity to come.
Yeah.
And he did that against Ian Gary and didn't have any success really until the end of the fight. But Carlos Prates does need to bring the fight to Leon Edwards and create chaos within the fight. If he doesn't do that, I believe Leon can do what Ian Gary did and stay on the outside against a somewhat inactive Carlos Prates, who's only going to give you about 3 or 4 blitzes or rushes at you per round. And if those don't work, he kind of just waits for the countering moments. Those are the things that Carlos Prates needs to watch out for, because Leon can just run 15 minutes easily, and he has the skills and the game plan to make it through 15 minutes against a guy like that. And Carlos is a hot prospect, but he's not a world champion yet. He's not a former world champion yet. So Leon has done it against tougher opposition, but the youth and the athleticism and then just the wildness that Carlos Prates brings is going to be a key factor. Now, the only other key factor I'll bring in that I think is sort of the oddball scenario for this is watch out for Leon Edwards to look for takedowns late in the rounds. I believe the rounds on the feet are going to be very close and competitive. But we've seen Carlos Prates have good takedown defense, and usually he can get up off of the bottom, and usually he like just like the main event, just like Jack Della Maddalena, he'll get put down on his butt, but he's automatically scrambling and trying to find a way to get back to his feet. We see that out of Carlos Prates, but Leon Edwards is a tricky guy, and he's a mixed martial artist. He knows how to mix all the martial arts quite well.
Yeah.
Don't be surprised if at the 4 minute or the 4.5 minute mark into each round, he looks for some sort of a takedown just to make sure he gets that round secured.
Round one, yeah.
And look, I don't see this fight being a finish unless Prates gets some sort of highlight reel knockout. I think it's going to be a measured striking bout, but again, don't be surprised if Leon Edwards does at least try to show some takedowns, because that's his clear advantage to winning the rounds, and I don't think you have to watch out for Carlos Prates throwing any takedowns your way.
Yeah, I think you basically kind of summed up all the technical aspects of it. I'll just add one more thing before we move on. It's the confidence factor.
Yeah.
I think Leon is
the purple Lamborghini. I love when he walks out to that.
Yes. Yeah. Carlos, that's a great walkout song, but and he actually lost that fight. It was Ian Gary fight. He came out. Has he been using that song?
I think he's done it several times now.
Okay.
But either way.
The first time I saw him do it was the Ian Gary fight. I was like, oh, that's a tough walkout. And then he lost the fight, of course. But, he's got a lot of momentum riding in his direction. Even after that fight, he's always been very confident, very brash. Leon has had blips in his career where he's had to have confidence reinstilled in him, including the title fight that he won the belt.
Yeah.
He's had times where he's not really believed in himself. He's gotten down on himself. He's allowed himself to check out in a fight. Right. And I think that's the difference maker here. I think you see a guy who's understanding, at least subconsciously, that he's on the downswing of his career, and another person who's very much on the upswing, which is why it's the only prediction I'm going to give today. I will save the other two until next week, but I do believe that Carlos Prates gets it done. I like him by a 2nd or 3rd round TKO, actually.
Oh, well, see, I like that. And again, if somebody gets knocked out in this fight, it'll be a Leon Edwards, but I'll save my prediction for next week so we give him something to wait for. But yeah, I do think that Carlos Prates is going to be looking to one-up himself. The fighting nerds are great at entertaining, and they've got a little bit of a chip on their shoulder. John Silva He ended up stubbing his toe. Caio Bahalio ended up stubbing his toe. Rufy ended up stubbing his toe.
Big time, yeah.
So the one that everybody was like, oh, all these guys are going to be champions or all these guys are going to be top contenders. But Carlos Prates, he's lost, and there's no way he's
Where's
ever
that guy that smokes cigarettes?
Right. Yeah, the Siga hitch.
Yeah.
So I think Carlos Prates right now sits in the top spot as far as all fighting nerds go, and there's a little bit of weight on his back for that, because now we can't have the fighting nerds go 0-4 at the end of 2025. That doesn't look so good, even though they're all taking a big step up in competition. Carlos Prates has the opportunity to bring all of the aura back to the fighting nerds. Remember, Chama was coming off a loss. He comes back and beats Ankalaev. It's like he never lost again.
Yeah.
He is right back. His stock is right back where
as high as it's ever been.
If the fighting nerds suffer all losses in a row and Carlos Prates doesn't go out there and finish Leon Edwards, it's going to be a knock to their confidence. But if he goes out there and wins again and does it in spectacular Carlos Prates fashion, I predict that we're going to see the fighting nerds have a total resurgence back in 2026.
Yeah, I could see that for sure. I mean, I think there's still a great camp at the end of the day.
Yeah.
Let's move into what happened this past weekend.
Yeah.
A few really interesting things that we need to talk about. I want to start with the most controversial thing of the evening, and
thank God for this, because no offense, but you're seeing the same stuff I'm seeing online. Is this is the worst fight night I've ever seen, and Dana, why would you put on such a bad card? And he gave a great answer. He's like, how can you say the card was bad when it hasn't even happened yet?
Right.
I love how Dana, he's always been able to clap back better than any CEO or any company leader. So I really do like that aspect.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good point, because some of the best fights that I've seen this past 3 months have actually been on Contender Series.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, the Contender Series this past season was just absolutely insane.
Right.
With some of the best fights. I mean, record-breaking fights, right? Where somebody had that fight have taken place in the UFC, it would have broken records.
Right.
But, I want to talk about Yadier Del Valle.
Yes.
This is really interesting, and I want your take on this, because I feel like you're one of the very few people who has a unique take on this, because he's a friend of yours.
Close friend,
he's a training partner.
Teammate,
Yeah, you spend, I mean, you're a little bit smaller than he is, but you spend a lot of time sparring with him, training with him. You've had a lot of rounds with him, and I think maybe a lot of people are looking at this a little bit wrong.
Right.
Now, his opponent, I don't know, Dugan, right?
Isaac Dulgarian.
Dulgarian. So Isaac Dulgarian trained at James Krause's gym.
Right. Red flag.
Of course, that's always going to raise a red flag.
Right.
I don't know much about the guy other than the fact that he's 7-2 now. Mm-hmm. I do know Yadi. I know how good Yadi is.
Right.
And I think what people are harping on is, okay, Yadi was such a big underdog. How could he possibly beat this guy in the first round?
Yeah.
I can't speak for the money coming in at the last minute, because that's, I can't account for that. I'm not a betting guy. All I know is Yadier Del Valle is chronically underrated.
Oh, yeah.
This kid's the real deal.
Oh, yeah.
Cuban wrestler, black belt in judo, black belt in Brazilian jiu-jitsu, and it's not just any black belt. He's under Opiano at Gracie Baja, West Chase,
legit.
Pedro Marino. These guys, some of the best IBJJF world champions are on those mats every single day. They're still in their competing prime, and that's who Yadi's grappling with. So I think Dulgarian may have made a mistake taking Yadi down, thinking he was a striker. Yadi's as good of a grappler as you're going to see in the division. Give me your thoughts on the fight. Give me your thoughts on the controversy. And do you think there's any legs to Dulgarian potentially having thrown the fight?
I can't speak for Dulgarian because I don't know him. And obviously, we've seen shady stuff take place in this sport and all other sports in the past, especially when it comes to money. Now, I'll give you my thoughts on the fight. Yadi cut through him like a hot knife through butter. I mean, there was no, if you go look at the stats, I think the Dulgarian landed 2 strikes.
Yeah.
It was not a competitive fight at all. But what was alarming was DC was having a fit calling the fight, because he's doing nothing right to defend these submissions, and somehow he was able to stay in a choke longer than most people that get caught in that choke by Yadi, which tells me maybe he wasn't faking it, but at the same time maybe he's just a really good actor. I don't know. I'm not trying to blame him. I certainly don't have a horse in the race, but what I will say is, Yadier has been a teammate and friend of mine now for years. Countless sparring rounds with him. He's an absolute monster, and he can submit. I've seen him submit very, very high-level fighters, and he is a complete package.
Fighters that if you named, which you won't, people watching the show would be like, wow.
Their jaws would drop. Yeah. Right. Yadi is a very high-level fighter. He's 10-0 for a reason. And look, the card wasn't huge last night, but he was on the main card, and I believe the UFC sees the promise in the Cuban problem. Now, as far as integrity of a human goes, there's not a better guy that I can spend every day with than Yadi. Yadi is salt of the earth, the nicest, kindest guy. And what I was talking to him about leading up to this fight is he was saying Dulgarian thinks I'm a striker. You know, if you go back and watch his Contender Series fight, it was largely won on the feet. It was largely won with a ton of striking. And then he did really good things in his UFC debut on the feet. But he did wind up with a submission. So Dulgarian, I think, was maybe misled, or he just thought that, okay, I don't have to deal with this guy on the feet. On the ground, I better go ahead and take him down. He's not going to be that big of a threat on the ground. Yadi, in my opinion, now he's great everywhere. He's very good at boxing. He spends time with Bobby Benton, who's a world-class boxing coach that trains at our gym as well. Coach of
Oshaki Foster, Regis Prograis, like
you name it.
Very high-level boxing
Austin
coach,
No Doubt Trout, the BKFC world champion. You know, these are the types of guys that Yadi is training with, and also the brains he's picking as far as striking goes. You know, if we have a question about the hands, Crew Bob Perez calls Coach Bobby Benton, and we get down to the science. What is the right thing to do with the hands in this situation? So Yadi is well-rounded everywhere. Very good striking, very good kicking. He mixes the martial arts well. His takedowns and his judo and all of that is very high level. It's fun to watch. But I do think Dulgarian totally mistaked him for a high-level striker, and that's why we saw the immediate shot. Now, that brings me back into the controversy, right? What is the rumors we're hearing is that this fight was fixed. All I can say, I'm very close with Yadi and his coaches and everybody involved with the fight. The entire fight camp was all about developing skills and figuring out how to beat Dulgarian. It was not about, we weren't on the phone. Nobody was on the phone.
There was no time where you were, figuring out how we can sell off a fight fix during the camp.
Exactly. And Yadi's not that kind of guy. He's get it from the mud and take it to the top if he can. That's his MO. And he's going to go out there and compete. And I believe he's going to be a ranked featherweight fighter by this time next year. I think he's going to keep streaking. I don't think he took any damage, so he's probably going to have a quick bounce back. And look, any type of headline is a good type of headline. Now, obviously, Yadi doesn't want to be blamed for fixing a fight, and I certainly don't think he should be, because if anybody fixed the fight, it's certainly not the guy that won it, but it would be the guy that lost it.
Dulgarian,
who Dulgarian also was on MMA Junkie doing an interview earlier this week or the week before. Last week, I should say. And he was saying that he believes all the fighters that get bet on in the UFC should get 3 to 5% of all the money that is bet on them. Now, whether you want to agree with that or disagree with that, I think that's lofty. I don't think fighters
that's
and
a silly thing to say.
Yeah, are we going to start paying the baseball players all the money that they're a third or 3% or 5% of what they're bringing in, because they're bringing in much more betting money than the UFC is.
Also, if you come from James Krause's camp, just keep the word betting out of your mouth, in any fashion.
Right. You don't want to have that associated with you. And the block is still hot as far as Glory MMA and all that goes. So I mean, you go back to Dana White. He's going to federal prison. You know, the quote's still there. And look, Dulgarian may wind up getting cut from all of this. It doesn't look good, and especially the sports books that are refunding people on betting on this fight, that's automatically a bad sign. Now the FBI is talking about getting involved, and they're really trying to put some screws down on this online betting, this sports betting, and then potentially fixing fights. Now, again, I don't know Dulgarian. I don't want to accuse the guy of a crime, but his actions in the cage were a little bit strange. Going into his last fight, he was like one of the highest favorites in UFC history, if not the highest. And then in this one, he was significantly up. And I just believe the odds were way off on this from the beginning. Because look, I know Yadi. I understand how good he is. I understand where he stacks up in the UFC with other contenders and whatnot.
And that's not just, by the way, like, I think it's important to say that's not just bias because he's your friend.
Right.
Because you train with other people that are in the UFC.
Right.
And you have seen your rounds with them, your rounds with Yadi, Yadi's rounds with them.
Right.
And of course, that's why we're not bringing up certain people's names, because there's certain people that you would recognize that Yadi is actually far better than in many cases.
Yeah, what you've seen Yadi do so far is we're just scratching the surface, because this guy is going to be a high level fighter, potentially a champion. Like I wouldn't just say that about anybody, and I wouldn't just say it because he's my friend. This guy is truly special, a freak athlete, one of the strongest athletes I've ever felt in the room, for sure. Especially being a 145er, he walks around, he fills that frame out perfectly. I just think that if anybody's blaming Yadi for fixing this fight or working with Dulgarian to figure this out, they're missing the entire thing. And I think that Yadi should have always been the favorite, even though he's unknown. But this is, again, why you see bettors making bank on things like Contender Series fights. Because if you've got your hand on the pulse and you really know the regional scene, and then you see two names get booked together, you go, oh my God, this is free money. And the betting odds don't understand that. And some fighters don't even understand that. But if you have a deep knowledge on where these guys came from, or where their last fights were, their difficulty of opponents, that kind of stuff can really weigh. And just because Yadi doesn't have a whole lot of fights in the UFC, he's only got 2 right now in 1 Contender Series, doesn't mean that he's not a high-level fighter. He's just not proven and not known yet. Now, Dulgarian coming in with that high rank and major favorite number in his last fight in the UFC made people go, okay, he's a great grappler. He's going to take this guy down. This guy seems to be a striker. I believe everybody bought into that hype. And I just think it was a miscalculation. But if he was injured and he didn't say anything, then it's kind of, it's on him. It's not up to him to disclose to the people every little injury, because if we're going to cancel fights or end things because of little injuries, then no fights would ever happen ever, because every fighter goes into every single fight at least a little damaged.
Yeah, and this is the whole bummer of the thing, and this is what I hope doesn't happen. Because the reality of the matter is, did Isaac Dulgarian throw the fight? I don't know. I have no idea what he discussed with somebody or why the money went in the way that it went in.
Right.
But I do know this. Yadier Del Valle can beat Isaac Dulgarian in the first round without his help.
Right.
100%. That's the story here. That's what we need to make sure doesn't get glossed over.
Right.
Yadi did nothing wrong. Yadi was in there performing as he performs. As I said, he's an extremely high-level grappler. Wrestling, judo, and jiu-jitsu. He's the trifecta. Extremely strong, good hands, good power. This kid's got a bright future. Don't tie him in with somebody who may or may not have done something unscrupulous.
Right.
So that's all I want to say before we move on. I think it's important to note here that I think that we should all sort of in our minds raise the stock for Yadier Del Valle
100%,
because he did what he was supposed to do. And whether Dulgarian had some sort of sideshow going on, to me, is really irrelevant, because when I saw those odds, I was like, man, Yadi all day. I don't care what Dulgarian brings. I know how good Yadi is.
Right.
And that's the problem here. That's why I think this whole thing is just such a bummer.
Right. And look, the last thing I'll say about Yadi, he's the last guy looking for a handout or a way to swindle through. He escaped Cuba and came up. He was very decorated in combat sports down there as far as training. And then he made his way, eventually got to Texas. And look, he's never been the kind of guy looking for handouts. Opened up his food truck in one of our other friends, Mike Trent's parking lot of his restaurant. It's everything has been tight knit, family related. I'm going to work hard for what I get, keep my faith, and then we're just going to march forward. He's not the kind of guy that wants to take shortcuts or anything like that. So I don't think the rumors of Yadi being in on fixing this fight whatsoever will continue. Hopefully everybody comes to their senses and realizes that. But yeah, I think Dulgarian has more than just the UFC on his back now. I think he's going to get a full-blown investigation, and who knows, that might get tied back into James Krause, which again, huge red tape.
Yeah, for sure. And guys, do you guys want to see us interview Yadi? I know there's a little bit of the language barrier there, but I do speak Spanish. I can facilitate the translation a little bit. I think his story is a really beautiful one. We definitely are talking, Nick, I know, about lining that up, but I would love, drop a comment below if you would like us to interview Yadier Del Valle, some of the questions you may have for him. I think we can try to set set that up in the next couple of weeks, huh?
Oh yeah, absolutely. As soon as he gets back from Vegas, he wants to do the show. You know, it was a scheduling thing when you had no voice, and then he was getting ready. He was in the last couple of weeks of fight camp.
Now I have half a voice.
Yeah, yeah. We were going to go out there, and then when you lost your voice, I was like, well, I don't speak the Spanish to cover the ground. And then my coach, Crew Bob Perez, he's going to join us for that as well. He was busy flying around coaching people as well. So yes, we are definitely going to do that. And now that we've got this controversy to talk about, it's going to be very interesting to hear from Yadi specifically, his thoughts on it. And I guarantee the honest reaction is going to show the fans like Yadi's not the kind of guy trying to sneak or hide anything.
Yeah, there may be a dirtbag in the situation, but it's not Yadi.
No.
So let's move on. Waldo Cortes-Acosta.
The eye pokes at heavyweight.
The eye pokes rolling from hell at heavyweight.
Yep.
And Tom Aspinall's training partner nonetheless. Right? So you think, God, Waldo's finished.
Yep.
And then all of a sudden, there's people in the cage.
Yep.
The ref never. This means fight's over, right?
Right.
That didn't happen.
Never happened.
So the people probably should have never come in the cage. 5+ minutes later, Waldo gets an opportunity and flatlines his opponent.
Yeah. Now I will say this: the UFC, every organization makes mistakes.
Talk about controversy. Dana White was right. Who said it's a bad fight? Now you haven't seen it yet. Little do we know that, Onama versus Garcia was going to be one of the most controversial cards of the season.
Literally, it's a very interesting night of fights. And just when you think you're like, okay, this is just going to be boring, tons of submissions, some great striking was on display, and then of course, it gave us something to talk about, right? We have the eye pokes, and we've got the gambling controversy. So it's even more for us to unpack. But the heavyweights, now, it's just so interesting when you're talking about what Tom Aspinall went through, only to have his opponent do the exact same thing to a guy the next time, and then be looking like, no, like the ref was supposed to stop it. Like you can understand how Tom Aspinall doesn't feel bad for Cyril Gahn at all, but would feel bad for his opponent or his teammate for doing the exact same thing. Yeah. And look, Waldo, he called out Aspinall after the fight. He was
poor
like,
Tom, right? The guy cannot catch a break. He's back in the headlines again.
Literally, Tom Aspinall was probably sitting there watching it going, for the love of God, just do not say you can continue.
Yeah.
If you say you can continue, my whole case is ruined.
And there was an eye that was poked. It wasn't even Tom's, and somehow his eye poke gets roped into the equation.
Exactly. And now the fact that Waldo came back and won, and he said, I don't give a damn. I'm going to keep fighting even if I don't have an eye. That just shows that doesn't help Tom at all.
No, it doesn't.
And of course, he called Tom out after that. But really, when you go to the post-fight, he was more focused on the Curtis Blades fight, which I think is a fun fight. And he's not going to get Tom next. But it is very interesting. The plot thickens as far as eye pokes at heavyweight go. But to watch his friend who looked pretty good, Ante Delija. I'm sure that I'm missing a little bit here, but he looked like a pretty solid striker. He looked like he was obviously an experienced fighter. Had a third nipple. I don't mean to bring that up. It doesn't seem like it has any relevance, but it was something that I caught. My eye was certainly drawn to it, and
You'll at least never forget him as a fighter again.
Exactly. I think his name should be Trip Nip, but who cares? Who cares what I think? But I really do think that Waldo Cortes just raised his value, and I think that the rest of the fans, the rest of the heavyweights are going to go, look, that eye poke, as far as visually how it looks after it took place, looks a lot worse than Tom Aspinall's, yet he still continued, and he got his hand raised. So I think it's a tough hill for Tom Aspinall to climb, and it just got even more steep. But again, I don't know exactly how they're going to go through changing anything. I don't think you really can change anything. And the referee's job is to be 100% locked into the fight, as close as you can be without getting hit by the punches, to be ready to break up fights when the time is right. We saw one gentleman get submitted last night, and the referee was on the wrong side. And look, the referees, like I said, I give them some grace. They're trying to figure out what's going on. But when, who was it? Who got submitted? I can't remember who got submitted. He was flattened out. He was flattened out, and the referee is looking down to see if the hand or the mouth is giving sort of any tap signs. But the hand was trapped under the fighter who was flattened out, and his face appeared to be flush against the floor. This hand over here was tapping the ground. He couldn't reach his opponent.
Right.
But it was tapping the ground. And the ref's just over here, completely blocked by the bodies, and until he goes to sleep completely. And it's just unfortunate because that one could have been worse. It ended up not being that bad, but it was the exact same situation in the heavyweight fights, right? If you're not in position to stop the fight, the guy got fouled. He showed what he should do. Like, hey, give me a second. You just fouled me. Very clear. The ref does nothing, and he's too far away to step in. And I can't really blame Tom's teammate, Ante Delija, because his job is to finish the fight and go out there and do damage. And if the ref's not stopping it from an eye poke, maybe it wasn't an eye poke, right? If you've ever fought before, you don't even remember anything that's taking place. You don't remember what round you're in. So it's very hard to remember, was that my hand or was that my pinky? Did it come out on I can't quite remember. And if Delija couldn't figure it out, then it's up to the referee to step in and intervene. That didn't happen. And thank God the referee didn't raise his hands, because we would have wound up with a totally unfortunate ending and likely a no contest. But I think that the referee and everybody settling down and then clearing the cage was the right thing for them to do. It was obviously a hectic moment in the event, but they got the right job done. They were able to figure out through instant replay, which I love. Why would you not use instant replay if you can? We need to exercise all sorts of aspects, all sorts of angles, and not just be so carte blanche on, okay, this happened and it looked like the end, so we can't restart the fight. And even DC goes, what are they going to do? Like, just restart the fight? Like, how are we going to just jump back into this? Or, it didn't feel like the fight was over, but at the same time, we're so accustomed to fights ending abruptly when something like that happens that it feels like we do need to use all 5 minutes. We do need to use instant replay. Yeah. We need to bring multiple doctors in. We need to figure this out. And as long as they keep handling it to the best of their abilities like that, I think then you'll get the most fair and honest results.
Yeah, but people need to stop poking people in the freaking eye too. I mean, like either that or they need to figure out it either has to be so severe of a penalty that there's a points taken every time you do it.
Right.
Or we've got to get new gloves. I mean, imagine like another sport. Right. Yeah. Imagine, like, let's say, for example, the shoes that people wear in soccer cause, 10% of the games to go awry and get canceled. Right. So the guys are running on the soccer field, they're rolling their ankles. 10% of the guys every
the shoes are gone.
Roll their ankles and they can't continue.
Right.
Shoes are done.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like, imagine the boxing gloves. Every time you threw a punch, your fingers got broken. Like, eventually it's going to be like, okay, we need to change something about this piece of equipment. They would do it in the NFL. They would do it in the MLB. Mm-hmm. I mean, look at the MLB with the weighted bats. Like if the weight's over here and not over there.
And the different helmets in the NFL and
it's
stuff.
Just they're so precise. And I feel like in a sport that's becoming a mainstream sport, we have a piece of equipment that's a vital piece of equipment that's not doing the job, at least part of the job that we intended to do, which is to prevent eye pokes. There's got to, I don't know what the solution is. I'm not a rocket scientist, but there's got to be somebody who can design a glove that allows you to strike effectively, that allows you to grapple effectively, that doesn't thrust your fingers forward into your opponent's eye. I just think that's not too much to ask.
No, it's not. And I believe the only way to fix it is through grave consequences. Yeah. I don't think switching the gloves is going to change anything. I think you're still going to run into that issue. And now here's the thing. I'm going to advocate a little bit for people that have poked in the eye before, because everybody's done it. If you train, if you fight, eventually it does happen. Hell, sometimes you can be standing like this ready to defend shots and somebody punch your hand and you poke your own self in the eye.
Yeah.
Anything can happen. It's a fight. We're not baking cookies. We're fighting, right? So wild things can happen and damage is the game. But illegal moves are tough. And the issue I have isn't with the eye pokes. It's with the results of what happens with an eye poke. How can one guy get a point taken and the next guy not? Yeah. How can a nut shot be grounds for a point to be taken, but two can't? As long as the guy's from the country in which the event is taking place, then he gets a little bit more grace. I believe, and this actually, I find it more interesting. Guaranteed 1 point every time something happens, accident or not. Your warnings come in the locker room before you enter.
Right.
And there's your warning. If you poke somebody in the eye, it's a point. Now, it changes the sport significantly. I guarantee you, though, there's less eye pokes and less nut shots when you do that, because if people know they're going to lose a point, sure, it's going to happen from time to time, but if they know they're going to lose a point, they're going to be a little bit more tight with their striking. But here's the difference. When you're parrying, no good coach would ever tell you to parry with your hands closed.
Right.
So when you're throwing strikes and then you're in a fight, and so let's say I throw this jab and then you throw one right back and I go to parry it, I'm not going to parry it with my hands closed. Immediately it's back to here to parry and have an active guard.
Right.
So what you have to do is figure out, how are we going to penalize these guys in a fair, even way for that everybody gets hit with if you take a point. Now, it would actually make scorecards much more interesting because, and I believe it would intensify some fights and even some later rounds in fights, because if you've got a guy who, you know, it truly was an accident, but he kicked a guy in the cup and he poked him in the eye in one round. Now he lost that round 10-8.
Yeah.
Or 10-7 if he even lost the X's and O's as well.
Right, or 9-8 or 10-7 depending on
Well, he's going to come out different in that next round, and I guarantee he's not going to be kicking to the inside thigh, and he's not going to be looking to parry in close range. So those types of things are definitely going to change. It'd be the exact same thing if you say if you commit a foul, we're taking X% of your purse away.
Yeah.
Now there you go. There's no points to be taken away. We're just going to take 10% every time you commit a foul. And you'll see those guys who are making 10 and 10 start to commit less and less fouls.
Yeah.
Because there's a big chunk of your income now going out the door for you making a careless mistake.
Yeah, and you know, talking about the parrying too, you know, when you think about a good coach, they also don't teach you to reach to parry.
Right.
And I think most of, you know, parrying happens close. So listen to Bob Perez, you know, your coach, and he always talks about being close with the parries. You don't want, if you reach, you set yourself up for
the hook
and the counter. So, you know, I think a lot of the eye pokes come from the distance gauging rather than the parrying.
Yeah.
They're gauging distance. So you know what? You just the fix to that is you gauge distance like this.
Right.
Yes, it's a few inches shorter, but you adapt.
Right.
Because that's, to me, it's not so much the parrying where that's happening. It's the distance gauging and it's the push-offs and stuff like that.
And that's a great point. That's true. But let's just, I'm going to play devil's advocate one more time. What about somebody who loves to get into the clinch?
Yeah.
Now, yes, you are supposed to technically throw a punch before you get into the clinch, but sometimes we see guys not throw the punch as a feint to get into a tie plum, but it's rather they're going and trying to grab the back of the head for the tie plum. Now, is that a move that should be illegal in MMA? No. But at the same time, you got to watch your fingers, because if you go out to grab somebody's face and they're moving in towards
you,
and
I slip into your finger, then who's like,
right?
And then. You know, you're right. It's like, how do you take them? That's why I come back to the gloves.
Right. And that's why I never harp on Dana, because he doesn't have all the answers. He never claimed to have all the answers. But he's like, look, I'm as flabbergasted by all this as all of you are. I would love for there to be a simple answer where nobody ever gets hit in the nuts and nobody ever gets poked in the eye again. But that's not this sport. And until we figure it out, I'm going to keep everything as is, because let's be honest, most of the time it's like a roulette wheel. It's going to land on a number. Yes, 1 out of every 20 or 30 fights, we're going to have an eye poke that ends the fight, and that's a 0-0 land. Nobody makes any money. But for the most part, we don't see eye pokes and nut shots ruining fights. Now, when it does hinder a fight, that's a big issue, and we have to bring attention to it like we're doing now. But again, I don't think we should just go, all right, time to put on the
Onyx gloves, or
Pride gloves, the Pride gloves back in the ones that are, or put on puffy gloves, because that changes the sport. It changes how fighters would grapple, and I just think all around it might not benefit the sport totally. I don't know what the UFC should do. I'm not the one who just says change the gloves, but again, I'm not the experienced guy like a Jim Miller, who has had more cage time than anybody in the world and has never poked anybody in the eye. That just goes to show you that these repeat offenders that are, Cyril Gane he's a repeat offender. He's a repeat illegal strikes offender. So when you see a guy like him do it multiple times, and you see other people get away with things multiple times, then you go, okay, maybe this isn't just an accident, but you're kind of a dirty fighter. And if that's the case, then the UFC shouldn't have any room for dirty fighters. We can't allow stuff like that to take place. But again, it's all hearsay, and it's very difficult to call in the moment. That's why we can't put too much pressure on the refs. But at the same time, something has to be done, and I believe it should be coming from the scorecards and the judges' ability to take points.
Okay, so last thing of the day, main event.
Yep.
Obviously not the most star-studded main event in UFC Fight Night history, but Steve Garcia is a real problem. This gentleman might be a dark horse of the division. What's its 7-fight win streak right now? So, really crisp, striking, fun style to watch. Pretty good on the mic post-fight. What were your thoughts?
I really liked everything I saw out of Steve Garcia. And look, I've seen him fight a little bit because he's had now 7 fights in the UFC. What's interesting to me is he missed weight in his Contender Series fight years ago. And, they didn't sign him. And he had to go out and go on the regional scene and win some more fights. But Mean Machine couldn't be a more accurate name. Yeah. He fights like a mean machine. He comes out high volume, in your face. I was so impressed with his head movement. The way he's always slipping off the center line is exactly how you have to move if you're going to be an effective striker in MMA. And when you have your head up, constantly moving, and you're never sicking on the center line, but you're bobbing and weaving, you're getting under shots, and you're throwing your shots every time you're transferring your weight, right? He would slip both directions, and then you might see him slip down towards his lead side just so he could throw a power 2 that was slightly off time, right? Yeah. And that kind of stuff is very disruptive and difficult to deal with. I thought that Steve Garcia proved that he is an undeniable force at 145. I believe he was on this trajectory of sort of like Merab, like, let's give this guy hard fights and see how he does. There's no way he's ever going to be champion, right? And then all of a sudden, he's just beating everybody up. And he's doing it really impressively. I was saying after last night to Chris, I was like, he literally has the style of like a high volume, like a Max Holloway kind of. Like, he's just going to come and get in your face. He's throwing tons of punches. He's going to mix it up with some kicks. He's all down for whatever and however this fight wants to go. But he called out Max Holloway, which was really interesting, and he's not going to get that fight. But I appreciate the fact that he did call out a guy like that, and the fact that I was saying he kind of moves similar to Max, I thought it was kind of interesting. Now, when he went into the post-fight press conference, he was talking about Josh Emmett. He said he wants to fight Josh Emmett, and then the person asking the question said, well, Yusuf Zalal was in your opponent's corner. He beat Josh Emmett, so why don't you fight him? There's some history there now. He said he's down for anybody. He'll fight Zalal. He has a feeling that they'll meet each other later down the road at the top of the division. But Steve Garcia just seems to me like that guy that came out of nowhere for most people, and now he's in a main event spot. So I believe the UFC, once they have a guy who maybe they think isn't the most marketable fighter in the world, once he proves himself and then they thrust him into a 5-round main event, you go, okay, now they see what everybody else is seeing out of this guy. Like, maybe he wasn't the Sugar Sean or the Alex Pereira. He's not doing anything that's really blowing up online, but his skills are there. And he's a very fun fighter to watch. I believe most people would become instant fans of Steve Garcia if they even just watched that fight last night.
He's your blue-collar fan favorite. Yeah. He's like, if you liked Tony Ferguson, if you liked the Diaz boys, like, you're going to like Steve Garcia.
Right, and he was great on the mic. Like you said, he was handling business on the mic. He talks about his road all the way up. He said he just wanted to be somebody in life, asked God for the direction, said, I'll put in the work. You just put me down the right path. And I'm grateful that he wound up in the path to the UFC because I think he's a staple for 145. Now, him and Yadier Del Valle are coming in hot. Yeah. And with a whole bunch of names at 145 that have been there a while, but maybe on their way out, you're going to see guys like Garcia and Yadier Del Valle book some pretty high-profile fights pretty soon. And I believe the changing of the guard at 145 is probably a year and a half or so away. But after a little bit longer.
Cue the Land Down Under music, folks. Like, not so fast.
Everybody but the champ, I guess. But I'd love to see Steve Garcia get a Brian T. City Ortega. That would be a fun fight. And stylistically, I think he would do very well in that fight. Also, it's a great leap in competition because T. City, even though he's not winning and not quite the guy he used to be, he still is quite a big name and he's still very dangerous. And obviously, when you get to the ground with him, it's a tough night. But his striking has come a long way. So I think that's the fight Steve Garcia should look for. Either way, the UFC's got one in Steve Garcia, and I believe he's the type like Merab where they're going to keep him active. And if he can keep winning, go on a 10, 11 fight win streak, you will see him fighting for a world title in a year and a half.
Yeah, I think that's well said. Guys, thank you for watching. This has been a longer episode than normal. For those of you that stuck around to the end, we appreciate you so much. Have a great week, and we'll see you next week.
Peace.